Just
all right.
No product placement.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's nothing to see here, guys.
Nothing to see. It's on the backside.
Anyways, welcome to the podcast. My name's Gus.
I'm Chris.
And we're just a couple guys talking about things that are happening in the world and things that we find interesting and impactful. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So let's make sure is this straight?
Yeah, I have to say, you have to bring me up to speed a little bit on. I've been withdrawn into my business, honestly, this past week.
I get it. Like most people.
Yeah,
they're just trying to get through their freaking day. I mean, they're just trying to pay their bills and feed their families.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the point of this podcast, is that so many people are lost in the sauce of their lives. It's hard to also track what's going on in the world. There's just a lot.
Yes, there is.
Right. And then, the struggle is, how do you then deal with trying to understand the complexities of what's happening on a global scale when it's hard enough just to deal with my fucking house.
The complexities of that.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Man, yeah,
so,
yeah.
That's the whole thing. We're not experts at this, and there's something wrong with my brain because I obsess about some of this stuff. So, anyways, what's been happening over the last since we talked last time, there's not been a lot of. We're kind of in a stalemate, I guess.
I feel like most of it actually happened in the midst of us having our last podcast.
Yeah.
Actually,
I mean, we're kind of in a stalemate. Now the question is who is going to feel the pain more? And I think that's what people are trying to figure out. Is this going to really, politically, the parties are sort of on opposite ends of this, of course, right? Democrats are demonizing this entire process. Republicans are saying this is our plan since the beginning, and it's the truth is probably somewhere in between, right?
As it often is, right?
Yeah. So what we're seeing play out in the world is we're at 145. China is really is at the center. China and the United States are at the center of this whole thing, right? And I guess they're trying to figure out, everyone's trying to figure out, who is this going to ultimately be more painful for us as a country or more painful for China? And I think we kind of touched on this last time. I think it's going to be more painful. It seems to me like it's going to be way more painful for China, but China just has a higher tolerance for pain, right?
Yeah, I think that they will weather that pain
better than the United States.
Much better and longer than the United States.
Because it's basically Xi Jinping is basically running things, and whatever he says goes, right? And I was looking at a stat. I think 400 million Chinese citizens are, I want to say, still living at that subsistence, which is they don't even have running water or anything. 400 million. That's more people than there are in the United States. Right?
It's crazy.
So they're not going to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have running water. You think they're going to tell if they're worried about poverty?
We're in it. Man.
They're in it, man. They're not going to feel that.
The ground is only so low.
Yes. It's so far you can go,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So they're not going to feel anything. So there's just a lot of they're going to be able to essentially weather that more, partially because of that, partially because they're a sort of totalitarian, country, mm-hmm. where whatever the president, which is they say president, but he's like an emperor, right? Whatever he says goes, and they're just going to follow that. And they're prideful people, which is understandable. They've been around for a long time, so that's understandable why they have pride in their culture. But it's about winning. To what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So they are okay suffering through the pain to be the winner at the end. And the United States is not that. Like, we're not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't have a culture of like win at all costs.
Yeah.
We're like, we have a culture of win as long as it doesn't get too uncomfortable and inconvenient. But once it gets too inconvenient, then wait, slow it down. Let's change the rules, or let's play a different game. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the United States. And I hate to say that, like, oh, we're not as strong in that capacity, but we just don't have the same tolerance. And we're in a different place.
I was going to say, I think it depends on what you're talking about tolerance, because I think that like we saw a lot, and luckily it didn't go as far, but like even during like, the events of 9/11, mm-hmm. like I think under those circumstances where I don't want to say if we were provoked, but if the aggressor was on the other side and something came here, I think that Americans have a significant amount of tolerance.
Well, yeah,
in that scenario, not necessarily in the scenario that we are.
But it has to be visceral like that.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
right? Like we would have that, but we're not. It's not just like
that has to be brought out of us.
Correct. Exactly.
Like,
yes,
Chinese culture, it just kind of sits there.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it's always there,
mm-hmm.
right? And they're Xi Jinping says, "Hey, we're like."
Is it just me, or is it fun to say his name?
It is. Yeah, he has a fun name. He does. He's but I mean, like they have a culture of like, hey, we're gonna feel some pain for a little while. It's gonna suck for a little while, but hey, it's okay. We're gonna win. Mm-hmm. Like, if you said that to the United States, I think Americans would be like, oh, okay, let's see what that is. And then like, I would say arguably that we could probably get away with that for like maybe 6 months. I would be surprised if we could do a year, but maybe. Mm-hmm. But at most, right? Like, after a while, if there's too much pain happening at the dinner table, like, people are gonna be like, no, this sucks. Like, we need to we need better than this. And I think a lot of that has to do with like where we're at in our economy. Like, we don't live in subsistence. We have by the standard of the world, we have a thriving economy, mm-hmm. right? By standard, not necessarily by our standard, but by the standard of the world, we have a thriving economy. Everybody has essentially, not everyone, but obviously the people who are homeless, but the vast majority of people in the United States have running water, have power, have access to food, and have mm-hmm. access to, like there's some kind of security force in place, police, fire, those kinds of things are very normal in American society, where they're not necessarily normal in Chinese societies. So, for us to be without any of those things, or any of those things being impacted, like, that is much more painful for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we live a much softer lifestyle, mm-hmm. right? That's been the case for some time now. So I don't know. I think that we're going to see some challenges. We could potentially see challenges if this cannot be negotiated sooner than later. Now, I will say, and I don't know, like, to what degree the impact to the Chinese economy this is all going to have. If it does have a significant enough impact to the Chinese economy fast enough, and where the people of China do feel it way more. How can I say this? Where they feel that pain in a significant enough manner where they themselves will potentially become riotous, then maybe we could. There may be a play there, right, where the mm-hmm. Chinese government would just say, "Hey, listen, we either need to figure out a way to get through this, or like a country of 1 billion plus people are about to riot against the nation."
See, I think that something else that, maybe it was overlooked or just isn't talked about a whole lot is like, so, the whole reason as to like why, or I guess one of the reasons, which I think is one of the reasons why Trump had made that move back in pausing the tariffs over that 3 months is because of what was happening in the bond market, right? And something that I don't think a lot of people think about is like, we're talking about tariffs right now. We're talking about who can weather the pain and weather the storm mm-hmm. on prices. But what I think that we're not really thinking about, it's not really talked so much about, is that China is one of the largest, if not, I believe they are the largest holder of U.S. debt.
Yeah, they're selling though.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So like that's their economic power from our side. Because if they sell, they may be selling at a discount, but then they're getting capital, which can also help them domestically. And then that hurts us because now that pushes interest rates and consumer rates and the ability to borrow. Like it pushes all of those rates up so high. So not only are prices going to end up being high because of tariffs and inflation that can be caused by that, but then the cost to borrow. So like the U.S. household is going to end up being pinched on both sides. It's going to be pinched from their ability to finance. And I'm not just talking about financing like to buy a new car or to to purchase a home. I mean, those for sure would get impacted. But I'm talking more about the fact that if prices rise because of tariffs and it puts strain on household budgets, and then they have to go look for debt in order to help subsidize that, whether that's credit card consumer debt or personal loans, like then that cost becomes more. Cost becomes more expensive.
I guess it depends on what kind of like where money would be spent, right? Because for the most part, we could probably get away with, because we're not going to necessarily see a lot, because most of the stuff that's being impacted by tariffs from China are products.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that they just put like an exception to like electronics and technology.
Correct.
Which I think is interesting because like that's like what they export the most of, right? So like if you're talking about, so then that makes me start thinking it's like, okay, so like then I just feel like it's a smoke and mirror chess game, if you will, or it's going to be, because it's like you're not going to tariff one of the major exported things from the country, which I can understand the argument was like, you're not going to tariff that because we're such a large consumer base of that. Like it's going to impact, it's going to impact Americans significantly if,
especially American companies.
Yeah. Their ability to purchase electronics and stuff. But then it's like, then I'm thinking, I was like, okay, but you're not, how then impactful are the tariffs actually going to be outside of being kind of like a political talking point that we are doing this? Like, so how does that translate into?
I don't think
what the goal was going to be.
So I don't know that the tariffs are necessarily. I don't think the point. I mean, this is my opinion. I don't know if this is right. This is the right opinion. I don't. Probably not. I don't think the tariffs were ever a like end game. Right?
No, I don't think so either.
So the smoke and mirror idea is very much, to some degree, true. It was meant to show that if we had to, like, we can make it very difficult for like China to continue on its current trajectory if we so chose, right? Because we're the largest consumer base in the world. We make up like 15 to 18% of their entire exports out of China. That's kind of wild. Which is
large, huge amount.
Yeah. I mean, one country is basically taking up like 15 to 18% of all of the things that they export. I mean, that is wild. Like if our GDP, that's tied to their GDP, right? Because that's all they do. If our GDP was slashed by 15%, that would be mayhem here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That would be absolute bonkers. Like, it's just unreal. So, I think that the point of the tariffs was to basically say, hey, listen, China, you're going to have to play on a more even playing field if we're going to continue to play ball. And then, just showing them, if we don't play with you, this is what it's going to look like. Right? So it's really to show, I guess, to kind of show them, hey, listen, you can't keep doing this BS and continue. I'm going to be honest with you. Like this whole, have you been seeing any of these videos of like Chinese manufacturers that are trying to sell direct? Like, oh, Nike, well, Nike sells you this shoe for $150. It costs $2 to make. I'll sell it to you for $20. Have you seen those?
Well, they'll sell it to you with the Nike branding on it?
Yeah, they'll sell it to you direct. Well, I mean, I don't know if it. Yeah, maybe some of the ones that we've seen. So like they did that with Hermes and Versace and stuff like that, where it has the logos on the bags, and they're selling these like $12,000 bags, and they're selling them for like, oh, we'll sell you this for $400.
How do they do that with the copyright and the?
They don't have to respect that. Like
so we can only control whether or not it's sold in the States or not.
Because you can't go to the Chinese courts. We have no access to their courts. You can't go to the Chinese courts and like, what are we going to do?
I mean, sue them? I mean, from the countries, you would just block their ability to sell within your country. I would assume.
Sell what?
The products. Access to those marketplaces.
How are you going to stop? You're going to stop every single like. That's why these like that's too hard to. That is too difficult to be able to manage. Like there's no way to know. Well, how do you know that is a Versace bag versus that is the knockoff, right? Mm-hmm. You're gonna have the people at the.
Then I guess it would just go through like authorized retailers, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's what's supposed to happen, right? But then like if a box comes and they just say, hey, it's a bag and the bag is worth X dollars, like what are you gonna do? Open the box and see if it's like a legit bag or not? Who's gonna do that? Like we don't have the. Like that's just too arduous for any country to go through every single cup. Is this the Versace?
I don't think it's like going through every single cup, but it'd be like if we can use Amazon. It's just like just for the example, it's like you've got to be if you're going to sell on that platform. I don't think it's arduous.
But they're not selling on that platform. They're selling direct. Like oh, here's a website. Go to my website. I'll ship it to you. Now what?
Oh, I mean, you could block those websites. I mean,
who can block those websites?
I mean, so the I don't want to say the government, but whoever the agency is for who.
It's too hard. You can make a.
I guess that's what
I can make a. Look, I can make a website right now. You block it, and I'll just make another website. I just change a letter or a number, right? Like, you know how easy it is for me to just change the website. Like, it's so simple. Like, it's just too hard for us to keep track of that. That's like a cat and mouse game. Like, it's too difficult. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just way too much to try to manage that. The expense of that alone would just be outrageous to try to do that. Now, in my view, I think that's a bad play on the part of China because they basically said, hey, we don't care about your copyright and trademarks anymore.
Yeah.
Because now what that means is that anyone who actually now has a trademark to do business is not going to want to send stuff to China.
It doesn't matter if they send it there or not. They would do it anyways.
Yeah, but the thing is that and that's the problem. It's going to be immediately right. They're going to immediately compete. But now, so China doesn't have like a history, at least more recently, of like creating new things. They typically just kind of take whatever already exists because they manufacture a lot of our stuff. And then they just kind of
spin it.
Yeah. And they kind of send it back to us in some variation, right? So it's instead of the handle being on this side, it's on this side, right? Think about that for a second. Right?
Geometry.
Yeah. No. The handle's on the other side. It's clearly a different one.
Clearly.
They're different. So I just think that that's going to be problematic for China because, they have been in the business of just basically copy pasting most of the things that they manufacture, and they're not in the business of necessarily creating new things. Now, I'm sure there's exceptions to that rule, but that's not what they're known for, right? So, for countries that have been using them historically to manufacture things, like eventually people are going to say, you know what, we're not going to use them because all they do is plagiarize and steal our copyrights, which we've known that that's been happening, but now they're just being out in front of it, right? So I think that as brands start to build, even if they try to copy, there's going to be a negative sentiment against Chinese goods because they're going to be like, oh, these are just copycat. How do we know these are at the same standard or built with the same quality or whatever the case may be? Like everyone's just going to make assumptions, like negative assumptions. I think that has a long-term negative effect because at first it's going to sound like, ooh, I can get these shoes for super cheap. I can get these bags for like nothing, right? But I think that's going to have a negative impact over time because people are then going to be like, oh, well, is that the real thing or is that the fake thing? Is it the same quality? Is it really the same? It might be, but
I mean, I think the only thing it's going to have a negative effect on is the brand equity itself. But like, I mean, people will buy. You go up to New York, go to Chinatown and stuff like that, and people are buying knockoffs all the time.
Yeah.
I think the majority of Americans, especially middle class or your average Americans, like it's the ones who want that is like the facade of having that.
But that's
status.
But that's for like those kinds of things, Gucci bags and stuff. Which that doesn't really matter for the average American. But that's going to trickle up to the more complex things, right? That's going to trickle up to like, oh, they build planes, and oh, they build cars, and oh, they build whatever the thing is, right? And if it's, let's say, computers, if they started coming out with a MacBook Pro, for example, and it was like, oh, it's the Chinese MacBook Pro that's not from Apple. Like, would you be okay to buy that? I'd be real skeptical. I'd be like, I don't know.
Sure, right. So, I mean,
now they may still do that. They still build them there, but it still goes through Apple, right?
Yeah, it still goes through their quality controls and all of that.
Whatever, yeah.
But I think that's different. So that's a completely different market product category. So I would agree with that.
But my point is that all of that stuff will trickle across all categories, because now if the reputation is all they do is basically take existing wares and they just copy paste them, and we don't know if there's a quality element that's there, then that's going to have a negative impact. So now Apple may say, you know what, we can't build our stuff in China because there's this negative sentiment about how China will essentially steal our stuff, and then try to resell it, right? And then people are gonna be like, well, what's the difference between you building the knockoff and you building the original? Is the original really that good quality? Maybe it's not as good a quality as I thought it was, and now there's negative sentiment on the brand.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that there's definitely some. I think there's going to be some long-term negative impacts to some of the, and some things that won't matter, like sneakers. You're right though. Like for sneakers and stuff like that, people may not necessarily care, but like for the more, I guess, complex, higher quality requirements that are necessary for, let's say, a computer, where people want to make sure that they're buying something that doesn't have, like, I don't know, that is following some quality control protocol that they trust. Because that's the thing about brands. That's why people like buying into brands for the most part. There's like I trust that you're meeting some quality threshold, that you have a history of something. Like, that's the thing that brands do. That's why brands work well, is because people have a trust in the brand, and then therefore
there's
they
an
buy.
Expectation.
Yeah, then they buy from the brand.
I mean, I think that would go towards it too. So it's like, I mean, I think it just makes it more complex, where it's not like as black and white. It's like, even if China copied the Mac itself, like 100%.
Yeah,
copied
it. They changed it from an apple to a peach or something.
Orange, yeah, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, to a peach with two bites out.
Yeah, the peach computer.
I mean, and you presented both of those to me. I don't necessarily know. Maybe it's the same quality or slightly, but unless it's like a super undercut, and I don't even know, because I would still, one of the reasons why I stick with the brands that I stick with is not just because of product quality. It's also because of the customer experience post-purchase, right? I have trust that if something goes awry, I can go to them and they're going to make it right. It's the mental energy that I don't have to spend. If I bought something, a knockoff from China, and it was the exact same product, I would arguably still not buy that, even if it was like 25% less, because one, there's no track record of, maybe it's the same quality product, but how do I know that it's going to last as long? Or if it just happens to be that one-off, and I have, like, because ironically, I remember my first Mac, man, the hard drive crashed. That's unheard of. Like, the Macs, that was like their thing back then. Yeah. Like, it doesn't crash. It crashed, and I had a white screen.
Yeah.
And they took care of it, because it was just like, that is just not
That's not a thing.
It's not a thing. It's
Yeah.
not on brand for them. And same thing with like, we'll go down to Bombas socks, right? So like, they're not a cheap sock, but I had a couple socks that like I really wore the heck out of them and had some holes in them, and they're not supposed to do that. And so like I called them up, and they sent me new socks and then
a new
some.
set of bougie socks.
Yeah, new set of bougie, but they're super comfortable, man. I love them. But then I also do it for them too because they give a pair of socks. So they adopted the Tom's model, right?
Okay.
But
what's
anyway,
the Tom's model?
For every shoe that you purchase, they give a shoe.
Oh, cool.
To someone without them. So for every sock, because like that's one of the things that. How rude, Jar Jar Binks tone.
I know, right? Sorry about that, guys.
That was like one of the things that when they did like their research and did their stuff, is like that was like the number one requested thing from people in like third world countries and homeless people, like homeless people in the streets, was socks.
Yeah.
They didn't have socks. So that became their mission. So for every pair of socks that they sell, they give a pair.
Oh, that's cool.
So, there's that philanthropy on the other side.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like it's not just, at least for me, and I'm not representative of every consumer in the marketplace, but there's so much other things that go into my purchase decision outside of just price.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, I think that I hear what you're saying, and I don't think that it's something that wouldn't pose a problem, but I think that the good brands have a very strong moat around them.
Yes.
From not just product quality, but consumer trust and what they represent outside of the singularity of sales of each individual product.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what I think, by China kind of doing the China manufacturers doing this thing, it erodes that moat. Right. It starts to erode the idea, because now, so what'll happen initially is that, I can get these shoes for a fraction of the cost, right? Mm-hmm. And then what their position is, the manufacturer's position, hey, these are the same shoe. I just send these to Nike and they put their brand on it and they sell it to you for an extra $120, right? So then people start to, from Nike's perspective, the brand, people now look at Nike and are like, wow, that's kind of messed up. Like, you're buying these for like $20 and then you're having me pay $150, and I can actually buy it directly from China for $50 or $30 or whatever the case may be, right? So now the brand starts to get eroded, which is bad for the brand. You see what I'm saying? Like, the brand starts to get eroded because now there's mistrust in the brand. Is the brand really, like, they're obviously trying to fulfill their stockholders and stuff like that to try to get the most profit out the shoe and so on and so forth. But they've built this it's not real, like this value around their shoe that is now worth $150 because that's what the market demand has been, right? But so people buy this $150 shoe feeling that there's the value there. But then when you find out that I can buy the same shoe without the Nike swoosh, for example, for, $25 or $30, or even with the Nike swoosh, maybe they even include, let's say they include the Nike swoosh on there, but it's not real. It's a knockoff, right? Now, all of a sudden, the $150 shoe is like, well, why would I buy the $150 shoe, right? So now you start to like wear into the brand of Nike. Now, Nike has a problem. Nike now has to find a way to be like, no, it's really worth this much, which is going to be difficult. How are they going to prove that now? So they have to build that back somewhere, right? And if there's going to be another manufacturer that's effectively going to, because the thing is, the truth of the matter is that's the way manufacturing works. Like, you build at scale so that each shoe is way less, and then you sell it at the market or whatever the market demand is, right? It's not like they push the value to 150. People, they were charging $95, and then they charged 100, and then they charged 110, and people kept buying. So they said 115, people kept buying 125, people kept buying, right? So now it's at $150. People have been buying, and then now that's going to completely decimate that $150, right? So whether that's right or wrong, I don't know if that's a question of right or wrong. That's just, hey, this is what people were accepting in their willingness to pay. So that starts to affect brand. Now, I will say the net positive on that is, my hope is that people will be a little bit more conscious of their excess. We have an excess of consumerism in the United States.
Oh, sure,
right?
absolutely.
And we have a willingness to pay for things way more than what the cost to what it actually costs to make them. Right now, obviously, China's manufacturing has been subsidized, and there's all kinds of reasons why they can make a shoe, as an example, for $25 because the materials were subsidized and the plant was subsidized by the government, and there's all kinds of other things, right? They pay their people like nickels and dimes to essentially do it, right? So there's all kinds of reasons why it's unreasonably cheap to build things in China. So I don't know that that's going to be something that can be duplicated in other countries as easily. But I do feel that people will be a little bit more conscious about like how much they pay for a thing, and maybe $150 is no longer the threshold for the shoes. For example, they may say, well, I'll pay 75 to 80, but I'm not going to pay 150 because that's too much. That's outrageous compared to like what it actually costs for you to make the thing. You can still make a profit and still be fine. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing that I wonder if we will see an impact in that, like in the mindset of Americans and how much they're willing to pay for a thing, because that is I will say that is a little bit of a mind bender where even if you believe fully in capitalism, that this thing cost me $15 to make and I'm selling it for $150, right? That's a mind bender to get around, like, what is that, 1,000%?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so is that reasonable, I guess, is the question, when the average American is having a hard time paying bills, and then these corporations are just racking in like crazy profits. Like, is that going to be something that Americans are going to be like, oh, that's a little unreasonable now, right? The fact that we don't have to pay $150 for these shoes. We are the ones who ultimately decide what the market value is of a thing. Will all of this sort of adjust the mindset of Americans to not pay as much, changing where the market thresholds are? You know what I'm saying? That'd be interesting to see, like, from a civilization, or I guess societal perspective. Be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, there's so many dynamics that come into that too, because like, I would say that, like, even if China was up, let's just, because we're talking about Nike, we'll use them as the example for the conversation. Like, even if they charged $60 or $50 for knockoff Nikes, right? I think that, like, a brand is so much more than just the product. So
it should be,
right. It should be. When I think, specifically, I think Nike has done a good job at, we could argue whether or not the shoes are too expensive or not, but they've done a great job at building a brand around a lifestyle. And, they do, we could argue also whether or not they provide enough support in the areas where they're in their philanthropic efforts. Right. But when people buy those, they're buying the lifestyle that a brand creates. You know what I mean? Like, if you buy directly from China, even if it has a Nike swoosh, I would argue that it would be more difficult to buy directly from there. I feel like.
What do you mean it's more difficult?
I just feel like, China prevents certain websites and everything like this from getting through to their people, or where they can't see stuff based on IP addresses and stuff. So, I would argue that the United States or any other country couldn't do the same thing and make it very difficult for people to access direct consumer products from another country.
But they're doing it now.
I know that they're doing it now, but we're not focusing. The conversation isn't around limiting that happening. It's happening, but nobody's talking about making that not happen as far as like blocking or anything. So it's like, I'm not saying that it's not difficult. I'm just saying that I think it's putting the cart before the horse, saying that we can't do something because nobody's focusing on.
Oh, I'm not saying
on doing it.
So I'm not saying we can't. I'm thinking what I'm saying is that it would take too much of an effort to do it. Because who's going to be responsible for that? Is that the government's responsibility to do, or is that Nike's responsibility to do?
Well, the government can't block, or the Nike can't block access to IPs and information. Okay. So it would default as a government responsibility.
Okay, so now you have to have a whole like a department of this to like work on that for every single like potential product that could happen that can happen with.
No, I think that it would. Well, I mean, I'm not literate around IT and stuff like that, but I would assume that it would be coming off of IP addresses. And I don't know, I don't think that you would need a department. I mean, they're rolling up all of these other departments, other under departments. So
no, I know, I'm
filter that through Doge.
Yeah, right. I mean, I just feel like that may be an arduous task. Like it'd be really challenging because IP addresses are based on essentially an IP address is basically a computer in a certain area. So I mean, where is the source of that IP? And that IP can be hidden behind VPNs, and that's it starts to get into real sort of. Then you start getting into more like IT technical stuff, like how are you going to ultimately follow that down the rabbit hole? I just think it's going to be challenging because not only do you have to do that within the United States, remember a lot of these brands have international, ability to. They're branded internationally. So Nike doesn't only sell shoes to
here in the States.
In the States, they should sell shoes in other countries too. So then what are you going to do about those sales? So it just it starts to erode it erodes the value that the brand is trying to bring to the market, right? And that's bad for the brand. And the reason why I think this whole thing is bad for China is that if it's bad for brands, then brands are not going to go to China for manufacturing anymore. And that can have a sort of a
pull their business.
Yeah, and that can have sort of like a domino effect for other brands and other like companies that are wanting to use that sort of cheap labor because the cost of that cheap labor may be too expensive, right? The cost of that cheap labor may be too expensive because the cost may be detrimental to the brand. And if the cost is detrimental to the brand, then what? Now, I was watching a gentleman who was talking about Hermes, I think is the
bag brand.
So there was one of the content creators from China was talking about how the Hermes bag, they build the Hermes bag. It's the same bag. They just send them back to Italy so they can put in their branding on it. But it's basically the same bag, right? They're the ones who make the bag for Hermes, where Hermes is supposed to be known for building the bags in Italy, right? And that's one of the things that's supposed to be a big deal about them. They build everything from scratch, handmade bags from Italy, blah, blah, blah. And they're saying that they're making those bags in China. This gentleman, and I have to do more homework on this, but this gentleman was talking about, well, Hermes actually, because they're saying, they only have like 12 people that work in Hermes. The rest of the manufacturing happens in China. Well, this gentleman was saying, oh no, Hermes has like a whole team of people, like 3,000 people making these bags in Italy. Like they actually build their bags in Italy. They don't they don't send their stuff to China. They actually build all their bags in Italy, handmade, blah, 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 blah. So then you start getting into the question of, okay, so then are they lying about making these bags for Hermes so that they can just like make it seem as though they make the same, and then the quality is the same and the bag is the same when it's really not. So now it's a question of like, okay, are they being truthful in the things that they're saying, or now are they lying about the things that they're saying so that they can just appear to have the same quality of stuff, right? And not necessarily under the same, like the brand moniker.
Yeah.
So that also becomes another challenge because now it's like, okay, well, they're not even like, if Hermes is not even sending their stuff to China, these guys are making a claim that they are sending the stuff to China to get built, which again erodes trust in Hermes as a bag. Like, I would never pay whatever they charge for bags. It's ridiculous. But I'm just saying, for those people who would pay for that, right? They're like, oh, well, these are Chinese bags.
You know, you can't even buy certain products from Hermes unless you've already spent so much money.
Oh, really?
Like, they lock you out of, like, there's products that, like, you don't even, it's how, like, their exclusivity and stuff works. Like, you've got to have, like, bought so many different bags
before you can even get to a certain bag.
You can even get to a certain
that's so
bag.
funny. Like, you qualify to buy this bag.
So, like, there's a whole, like, I guess, ecosystem where, like, people or, like, influencers go buy these bags and stuff and then, like, sell them off so that they end up being able to, like, get access to other products. It's very, I was somebody at Louis, I was in Louis Vuitton, I don't know, a few months back I don't remember why I was in there. I've got no business being in there. Not really a luxury brand person like that. I do like Burberry though. That's like the one. But they were telling me about that because they had this trunk, man. They had this trunk. It looked like it came out of Bridgerton, Louis Vuitton, and it was like this big. It was like this big and like that and like this tall.
Yeah.
And it was like one of those old school cases that is not convenient, nor would I ever travel with it because the airline industry doesn't give a shit what it looks like afterwards.
Right.
But it was like $80,000.
Holy crap!
And they're like, but you can't get that, because they have something where it's like you've got to like buy a few.
Oh, interesting.
You've got to like spend so much, or
it's like a game.
Yeah, you've got to like level up.
Oh, that's so funny
to be able to get that.
That's crazy.
I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm never gonna buy that just out of principle. But yeah, no, I didn't mean to get us off track. I just thought that was interesting. But yes, no, I hear.
But that goes back to your experience thing, right? Like they've built an experience where in order for you to get bag number 5, you have to go through bags number 1, 2, 3, and 4 to earn bag number 5. Correct. You've now earned the ability to purchase bag number 5. Yeah. So that means you would have had to have bought bags number 1 through 4, and that's the experience. And part of what you're paying for is that experience, right?
Which is why people will buy those things and do it, because like that, I'll use that $75,000 case, right? You might have to spend $40,000.
Yeah, before you can even
buy that $70,000 thing. Right. So, if I'm that person, I'm going to buy that stuff, and then I'd resell it at a slightly higher margin and get that. And then now I've got this access to this box,
right?
That cost me $75,000, and I'm going to sell it for $100,000 because there's an entire market of people who don't even have access to that product,
right?
Because it would have cost them.
Because they have to buy all this stuff earlier.
They have to buy all this stuff earlier in order to
yeah.
even be able to buy that. And I'm just like, I mean, talk about an arbitrage opportunity.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, that's just wild.
That is wild.
Because I can't. I don't know. I try and put myself in that position too. Like, even if I like was reasonably able to afford that, like I just don't. I can't put the value in that.
I don't think the value is in the. So I think there's an exclusivity there, and the people who are buying those kinds of things, like, they're not, like, money is not a.
So that's an interesting mindset concept, right? Because I often ask myself that, like, because in my mindset right now, I'm like, if I was able to afford that, I'm filtering it through the lens of opportunity costs of what else I can do, right? And I'm like, I would never do that. But I'm wondering, like, if when I get there, am I still going to hold that same?
I don't think so.
Mindset, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around that because I feel like I would, right? But,
right. I mean, I think that once, at least from the people that I've spoken to, because I'm not been at that financial level, but the people that I've spoken to that I know, like, money's a different animal for them, right? And there's also different mindsets even with people who are like ultra rich, but like they think about money differently because they don't need money; they have so much of it.
Yeah.
Right. So they think about money differently. So for them, the game of like, okay, think of it this way. Money's no object for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you want this cup. You can't have this cup. But money's no object for you. right? So you're like, wait, what do you mean I can't have this cup? I'll just pay for it. No, you can't have that cup. If you want that cup, you need to buy that cup first. Oh, no, but I want this one. No. If you want this cup,
you gotta buy that.
You gotta buy that one first. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like it's one of those scenarios where you have to go like it doesn't matter how much money you have to go through this process, this protocol, in order for you to be able to level up to be able to get the next thing. And for someone who has a ton of money where like I can buy an airplane tomorrow, but I can't buy this cup, like that is something that's like, oh, like now that's appealing to me because I can't have it. You see what I'm saying? So they're okay to go ahead and buy the thing ahead of it so they can get the cup that they want or the bag or whatever it is that they're going to get. Because rich people can pretty much, once they have once you have enough wealth, you can pretty much buy whatever you want.
Yeah.
But they're saying, no, you can't. You can't buy whatever you want. It doesn't matter how much money.
It's the takeaway. It's the power of the takeaway.
That's totally what that is. It's like, but it doesn't matter if you want to buy this for $1 million, we're not going to sell it to you. You can't have it.
It's not about the money.
Yeah.
But it is.
You see what I'm saying? Right. You know what I'm saying? So like it's a different thing. So I think that it's one of those things where like under all things being equal, right? If I was super wealthy and I wanted to buy something, I can just buy it. But with that setup, with the way they have it set up, I'm not able to.
Yeah.
So now I have to go through this extra work, which I'm not used to, because I can buy anything. Like I got to go through.
Can you imagine if that was how the real estate market was set up? No, you can't buy this house. You have to have bought a house before in order to buy this house.
You got to buy the smaller house before you can get this bigger house.
What are you talking about, man?
Yeah,
that's so crazy. I mean, but that goes into like pricing strategies and stuff, right? Like, so to your point, like with brand deterioration, I mean, that's separate from, loss of, that's separate from pricing, right? Because like if China comes in and they price this product so low, and then it's all right. So now Nike needs to address the brand deterioration that could happen, but that's not necessarily reflective on the price, because they might be fighting that battle, and you might still see pricing continue to go up because there is still a market of people who want the real thing.
That's true.
Right. And they continue being one. So Nike's like, okay, well, there's people who really want the real thing. And they're actually willing to pay 20% more for that real thing, which offsets.
Yeah, but that's not 20% more though.
No, I understand, but the market, the dynamics of how much they're going to lose from people not buying,
maybe, yeah,
versus what they need to increase in order to make up for that.
I mean,
loss of demand. So it's not a linear.
I would agree. I also think that it'll also change the like brand dynamics. Like what is the brand bringing to the table? Like it'll change a little bit of that too. Because now part of this if it's not just about the money, right? If you're not buying it just because it's cheaper, you're buying it because you want the Nike brand.
You want to be affiliated with that brand, what that brand stands for.
So if I bought shoes that had a Nike swoosh, people would affiliate me with the brand, right? Even though that's not a real Nike, right, shoe. However, if there is, to like what Hermes is doing, if there's a whole experience that's tied to the brand, which Nike doesn't necessarily have right now, but they decided to implement an experience that's tied to the brand, then people will want to buy into the experience. It doesn't matter what the product is. You know what I mean? So like Hermes, if the experience is you got to buy this before you buy this, right? Like you're buying into the experience of having to go through, I'm going to buy this cup first. And then once I make use of this cup, I've used it for a few weeks or months or years or whatever. And then I'm going to go ahead and it was a great cup. I'm not going to use this anymore. I'm going to go ahead and buy the next level up cup, right? Like I'm going through that experience. And the only way for me to get to this cup, and especially if there's cups all the way down the line, cup number 10, I got to go through the experience of each of those cups, and I get to experience what this cup has versus what that cup has, and then you I don't
Just
know,
laughing
cups.
about you.
I know.
The handle's on the other side.
Yeah. Right. So that whatever the case may be, right? So each you go through, there's a whole experience that's tied to that. So one thing that I think brands could probably do to help solve for that is create a deeper experience with their customer base, because then it's not just about the value of the item, it's the value of the experience.
Well, and I think that brands have been doing a great job with that just over the last decade or so. Like, I mean, there's still some room for improvement, but I think that a lot of brands have shifted more into the experience or the affiliation of the brand, not necessarily just, you're wearing the logo.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'll use Nike again. Like when I think of Nike, I think of athleticism. I think of health. I think of wellness. I think of like Paralympics. I think of like some give backs. Like, so I think about like all of these different things. It's not just about wearing the swoosh, right? And different people put different values on that. But before, I don't know, 10 years before, there wasn't this focus on a lifestyle or an ecosystem of stuff. And I think Apple actually started that. I feel like Apple started that trend where it was like, hey, this is like what we're about. Where you said, what did Steve Jobs? What is that quote that he said? Something about nerds or something. I can't remember what it was. But he like established like the why. Simon Sinek had a good speech around how brands are built around like why, and Apple did a great job at marketing from the why first. And it's like, this is why we do it, and this is how we do it, and this is what we do. This is what we create in order to deliver that for you. And so now I think a lot of brands over that time have started adopting that. They've like focused, and this is what we talk about in our businesses too, right? It's like, for us to grow, like we really need to resonate with our why in order to build out something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think brands have been, just in general, have been doing that. We see that with Bombas, we see that with Tom's. Like there's the why in it. Like they go back, it's like the reason why you should buy with us is because we do these things.
Right.
And by you being part of this brand and supporting in the sales and purchases, we are able to do these other things. I mean, there's still work to be done, right? I mean, and there never will not be work to be done because everything is ever evolving, and consumer values are always changing, and brand values have to adapt to that stuff. But I think that would be something, where it's like, again, if somebody tried, I think that there is a problem with coming in and undercutting. There's definitely some deterioration of brand for people who are not focused on the whys or the
they just want the stuff.
They just want the stuff.
But that's a lot of people.
I think that that's a lot of people. And I also think that, I don't know, I would argue that at least coming out of China, the sentiment that the average American, majority of Americans have around China, I feel like they would self-boycott that.
Who?
Just the majority of Americans.
Would self-boycott getting...
Just not getting stuff directly. If the messaging is coming that China is doing this and we're fighting China on this front. And
I don't know. I would, maybe. I mean... I think there are people, like what you said, you go to a lot of cities and they have these sort of like, knockoff, like places where you can buy knockoffs and stuff like that, all over the country. Americans have a keeping up with the Joneses problem.
Even though we are the Joneses.
I know.
Comparatively speaking.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. But we have a keeping up with the Joneses problem. Like everyone wants to kind of like, that's why people, they don't have a house, but they'll have a Mercedes.
Yeah, house poor.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, they live in they live in, in poverty, but they're walking around with a Range Rover. You know what I'm saying? Because they are keeping up with the Joneses.
Can't afford to drive it, but I got it.
Right. But they want to appear to be rich, and famous or whatever. They want to appear to have like those elements of wealth. So, and there's a lot of people that are like that, which, I mean, that usually is one of the main reasons why they never get out of that, right? Because they are trying to keep up with the Joneses. So they're just basically, going into debt to be able to appear as though they have more than they have.
Yeah.
So like, there are a lot of people that are like that. That's a I think that is a quintessential American problem
Mm-hmm.
where people are trying to show off like where they are. There's just, cars have our status symbol. You see that.
Yeah.
People, and then if you don't have, I mean, I've seen that in my own circles where people have bought cars and then their friends are asking, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? They just bought a brand new car, right? They bought a brand new car and their friends are like, well, it's not a Mercedes. Are you okay? You're like, they just bought a brand new car. And I know them. I'm like, they just bought that car cash.
Yeah.
They literally just went in there and be like,
There you go.
right?
You're gonna ask Warren Buffett. He's living in the same house, driving the same car, eating the same McDonald's for 50 years. I'm sure he's okay.
But yeah, exactly. But the implication is like, are you okay? Like they just bought a brand new car. Are you okay? Because it's not a Mercedes, it's not a Range Rover, it's not a BMW, whatever the case may be. It's right. So that is something that's very real, right? Yeah. It's a very real thing, and there's pressure in our society to keep up that unless you are comfortable pushing back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it's very hard for people to be comfortable pushing back, like, to be able to respond to that, like, yeah, I'm fine. I just bought this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what? Because, and then challenging them, what? Because it's not a Mercedes. I'm not okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is like, these are highly successful people.
Like, bro, point A and point B is the same distance for me and you, bro. Yeah. Okay. I'm all right.
You know what I'm saying? So like, it's crazy to me that is very commonplace here in our culture, and that there are challenges that people they'll have perceptions of challenges because you're not meeting some imaginary standard of like where you should be in life because you decided not to stay with a Mercedes, or you decided to go with some lesser, quote unquote, lesser brand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that. And I think that is a little bit of a challenge because I don't know that there's a lot of people that would stand on principle on that. They just want the cheaper thing.
That's a fair point.
You know what I mean? So, and honestly, part of that is also that, as Americans, we have an income challenge. Like, as rich as our country is, we should have a higher like median income across the country.
I agree.
We don't have a strong income. Our income has not kept up with inflation over time, and like we just don't have that.
Yeah.
Where we can afford to say, well, I want to pay $150 for Nike shoes versus the $50 or something for. You know what I mean? Like I can pay $50 and have essentially the same shoe. Like why wouldn't I do that? I don't care about the brand. I care about what people see me in.
Yeah, income. That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how this all plays out, but it's going to be interesting because I think brands are going to have to, which are essentially the corporations, they're going to have to figure out how to reestablish value. Mm-hmm. If a person can buy a thing for a fraction of the cost direct from China, and it's essentially the same thing that you're selling, like how are you going
they're going to have to address that.
Yeah, they're going to have to fill that gap somehow so that people are like, oh, I don't want to pay the $50. I'm okay to pay the $150. Mm-hmm. Well, that's $100 of value you're going to have to justify to people.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some people that are fine to just pay the $150 extra or the $100 extra, right? Because they're principled and they can afford to do it. But for everybody else, like you're going to have to really make a good case for that extra $100. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's going to be too difficult for the government to try to like manage that.
Yeah.
That's really tough. That's a difficult proposition to try to put that on the government to do.
Because we know how efficient they are.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think that I've heard sort of differing thoughts on like what these tariffs are ultimately like, how they're impacting China. Mm-hmm. There's I have read some articles and seen some videos where there are a couple of challenges that they're running into is that the barges and storage containers, the delivery containers are basically going back to China, and they have this sort of huge influx of like wares sitting in their ports, that manufacturing plants are essentially shutting down.
Yeah.
Because they're not taking any orders right now because no one's buying,
Mm-hmm.
their stuff at 145% tariff and they're not eating it. They're just going to try to pass that down to the consumer, and consumers are going to be like, no, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, so I don't know how long they're going to be able to do that for versus what are we going to do by exchange? They need the money to sustain their economy. It's the stuff that they sell to us is not as detrimental as the stuff that we buy from them.
Yeah.
Like they need the money more than we need the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We just are very accustomed to having all the stuff.
Right.
So it's at this stage, it's more of an inconvenience. Now it does suck for companies that that is their main source of business.
Yeah.
So all of their things that are being manufactured in China, those businesses are going to hurt bad. They're getting hit.
Yeah.
Pretty severely. So
let's see what happens over the next week.
Well,
I mean, it's gonna be longer than that, but we'll see what happens between now and our next conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking with a friend of mine. He's he builds guitars. Well, he designs guitars and then he has them built in China. He's concerned about this whole thing and that's how it's going to affect him, so on and so forth. So, we were talking. He's like, well, I may need to find another manufacturer. So I started doing some homework on different manufacturers,
mm-hmm.
That make guitars and stuff like that. And I actually was able to find a few. I don't know what their quality is, but it seems like they're on par.
Yeah.
And the cost was not that crazy different. So it's very plausible that we might be able to make some things here. There's going to be a lot of stuff we're not going to be able to make.
Sure.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. We can't. I don't think that we're going to be able to bring all of those jobs back to the United States. We could. I think we can bring some of those things here, but there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff that it's going to need to stay in China, assuming that China is willing to play ball.
Right.
Now, I do know that. Did you hear that China and Australia, so they're not buying our beef right now? That's a big thing. Are you heard about that?
No, I haven't heard about that.
So they're not buying our beef and they're not buying our soybeans. And that was a big export for us to China. So they're going to be buying their beef from Australia, which I don't know how strong the Australia beef market is.
Yeah.
And then I don't know where they're getting the soybeans from. But so, there are some farmers that are definitely going to feel some of that too. And I don't know what the government's going to do about that, or, or if they're going to just try to find another place to export to. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure how that's going to ultimately play out. There's definitely going to be some pain that we're going to be dealing with. So it's just a question of how much are we going to be able to tolerate? If we can weather the storm, I mean, this could end up being a net positive. I mean, you were mentioning earlier, the bond market, and that will ultimately can cause inflation. I will say the one good thing about inflation, if there is a silver lining, is that inflation makes our debt easier to tolerate, because the debt doesn't change, but the value of the dollar does, right? So if the value of the dollar goes down, then it's easier to pay off the $30,000, as an example. Let's say you have a $30,000 debt. It's easier to pay off $30,000 if the value of the dollar goes down, because that means the value of the debt, the dollar that you initially used to buy, had a higher value when you first took out the debt. But now that the value is lower, it's easier to pay down that debt.
I think that's an interesting topic that we could delve into maybe next week.
Yeah,
for sure. Because I'd be interested to discuss that. I do hate to do this, but I do gotta go.
I know you gotta get out of here.
Yeah,
that's all good. So, but anyways, yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts that are happening with this whole tariff situation. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. And it's so funny to see both sides. It's like a tennis match where you have there's a few, and it's funny because you see a few people that are kind of in between, just kind of okay, I'm trying to understand what's going on. And like where you see people on the right and left side where they're taking a political stance.
Yeah.
And they're talking from a position as if they know.
Yeah, nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows. You know? So it's crazy to me that like
I'm certain I don't know.
Yes.
But I would speak as if I do.
Yeah. It's just crazy to me that they're like, oh, but this is gonna happen and then that's gonna cause these other things. Like this is like uncharted waters where we are right now. There's no way anyone would understand like how this is going to ultimately play out. So it's going to be interesting to see. I still have a wait and see kind of position on it. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Hopefully it ends up being not terribly painful for anyone, including China, because I don't have any ill will against that country or those people. But I do think that it's starting to sound like it's very plausible. It's starting to sound like it may be way more painful for China than I initially thought it was going to be. And it may be way more painful faster than I thought it was going to be. And if that is significant enough, that may get them to a position to be willing to play ball and actually negotiate a deal. So I hope that's what ultimately ends up happening, that we negotiate something that's fair to them, fair to us, and everyone's happy. So, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some unhappiness somewhere. That's usually the sign of a good, what is it? The sign of a good negotiation is that everyone feels a little pain.
Yeah.
Right?
They feel a win and they feel a loss.
Yeah.
It's called compromise.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Yeah. That's a compra.
Compra what?
I don't know.
I don't know. Is that English?
Right. Anyways, let's keep it going. We'll be here next week. I appreciate you guys watching. My name's Gus.
I'm Chris.
And we're just some guys talking about politics and stuff that's happening in the world. So if you guys have any topics that you want us to cover, make sure you comment below. If you have any thoughts on anything we've talked about today, please go ahead and comment. Please share. Please like. We appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.
Peace.
All right. I'll be right back. I gotta take a massive leak. It's been